Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first of a new kind of series thing I want to start doing, where basically we're going to be going through all of the different characters in Marvel Crisis Protocol, probably mostly ones that I'm more familiar with playing myself. So there'll be a decent number of Avengers, but I might eventually pull in someone like Reed to do some X-Men ones or something like that, so we can get a little bit of variety on these. But basically, I'm going to be going through these characters one at a time, one episode per character, to kind of discuss some of their strengths, some of their weaknesses, go over their overall kit, what they're trying to do, where they want to be, what kind of teams they might like, some possible synergies, that sort of things, and just generally kind of give a full breakdown about a character. So today we're going to be starting out with Captain America, the first Avenger. His stat card just got revealed officially today. I mean, we'd already seen the front side, and I think we'd had some photos from Gen Con kind of leak out showing the flip side, so we kind of knew what we were gonna see here. But now we've got the panel to play, so I figured this is a great place to start. I'm an Avengers player, so I feel like I'm at least mildly qualified to talk about this character, and it's a new character, so hopefully a lot of you guys will be interested in hearing about this one. Of course, we're not only going to be doing new characters. I do definitely plan to go back and talk about some characters that have already been released. As a matter of fact, most characters that have already been released. Not really sure what the kind of upload schedule is going to be like on these. They're probably not going to be quite as consistent as the battle reports, which right now I've been doing weekly, but we're gonna see how they do because they're also gonna be a lot easier to make than battle reports since they're not gonna require nearly as much editing as a battle report would. So we'll see. I might be a good little thing that I can use to kind of start pushing towards maybe 2 videos a week or something like that. But I don't want to make any promises at this time. One other thing I do want to just clear up before we get into talking about Mr. Steve Rogers here is I am a mildly competitive player. I go to local tournaments and I follow the meta relatively closely, but I'm not the best player in the world. I'm not going to pretend that I am. So if my opinions are hot garbage, then I apologize if you're a competitive player watching this and you're like, what are you saying? Why would you think that this is a good idea? I apologize. At the end of the day, everything given here is my own opinion and how I plan to use the character. So again, because I mainly play Avengers and I do play competitively with Avengers, I think I have at least some say when it comes to Avengers specific characters at least. But I'm not going to pretend I'm the best player in the world or anything like that. So you are welcome to disagree with me, and if you do, please let me know what you think in the comments. What parts you disagree on, and where you think the character shines other than whatever I talk about here. So, without further ado, we're gonna get into this. I've already spent 3 minutes rambling, according to my little recording timer here, with Captain America. So I'm not actually gonna go and read through the panel to play because a lot of it's kind of fluffy and stuff like that. But this is, of course, the new leader announced with the Earth's Mightiest Core Box for Avengers. So to start him out, we're going to look at his defensive line here. He's got 443 with 6 health. He's a threat 4, he's size 2, and a medium mover. Pretty standard lineup there. We see stuff like that on 4 threats all the time. We're going to get into his defensive tech though and see that he's a little bit bulkier than he looks. Um, So we'll start out with his attacks here. So his first attack is a shield bounce. After this attack is resolved, he's going to gain power equal to the damage dealt. It's a range 3 5 dice builder basically, with a wild hit bounce, which is basically like Ricochet from the old Steve Rogers. So after this attack is resolved, he may make an additional shield bounce attack. The additional attack must target another character within 3 of the original target character and maybe any distance from this character. The additional attack does not have the bounce special rule. So it's worded a little bit differently than Ricochet, and I don't really know what the reasoning is for that. Maybe they just wanted to clean it up a little bit. But it is worded a little differently, but as far as I can tell, functionally it's the exact same. So basically, if he gets that wild hit trigger, he's going to get to make this attack twice against 2 separate characters, and that's also going to let him potentially build power twice, which is really, really nice. Then we're going to go into his spender attack, his Brooklyn Brawler. So this is a range 3 5 dice 4 cost attack. where he adds dice to the attack roll equal to the target's size. So against most like size twos and stuff like that, he's going to be throwing 7 dice. But if you throw this guy into something like a Hulk or even a Sentinel, that's going to be 9 or 10 dice, which is going to be pretty hard hitting. So this cap is definitely capable of punching above his weight class, quite literally. So he's got a couple triggers on this, and they're all on different symbols, which is really interesting, but we'll get into why that is in a moment. So first he's got a critical push after the attack is resolved. If the target character is size 3 or less, he may push the target character away short. So that's solid, size 3 push, can't complain. Obviously it's would have been a little nice if it had been a bigger one, especially since you do want to be throwing this attack into size 4s and size 5s as often as you can, but still having the push on size 3 is useful, and that can score you a point in a pinch. So solid ability to have on a spender. He had a throw on his old one, I think. So the big one here though is frontliner. So this is a wild hit shield trigger. So bit of a crazy trigger going on here. After the attack is resolved, he may make an additional Brooklyn Brawler attack without paying the power cost. The additional attack must target a different target character, and it does not have the frontliner special rule. So basically, he can do this attack twice. It's kind of like a flurry or something like that. However, he can't target the same character with the new one. So yeah, I mean that's quite good. It's a little bit of a difficult trigger to get. You're not going to be getting that super consistently, but again, we'll talk about that more when we get to his leadership because that's going to raise his odds for everything so much. So I mean, yeah, the potential to throw out two 9 to 10 dice. I mean, playing against Sentinels, this Steve is going to be a monster. Although, to be fair, Sentinels don't really need the nerf. Um, but if you can nudge this guy in between two size 4s or two size 5s or something like that, he's going to be hitting like an absolute truck. Throwing two 9 dice attacks in a single turn, or if you have the power to do the attack twice, throwing potentially as many as 40 dice in a single turn, that's just pure value. So yeah, he's going to be hitting well above his weight class if he's going into those large targets and even into smaller targets. I mean, a 4 cost spender into a size 2 or size 2 or 3 with a 7 or 8 dice attack, that's still quite solid, and the ability to potentially attack twice. Also hitting from range 3, so he doesn't even have to be that up close and personal to get this going. That's just a solid attack. I think attacks wise, he's quite solid. Next, we have his leadership, the Earth's Mightiest Heroes. So it's an Avengers leadership, of course. And basically, what it says is once per turn, when an allied character is attacking during the modified dice step, if there are one or more hit results in the attack roll, it can spend 1 power. If it does, it changes one of its results to any other result. So this is really, really big. This can be guaranteeing you one more damage just because, like, I left him alive on one. That's terrible. Well, no, I didn't. I'm going to spend 1 power. This thing that was a miss is now, sometimes you just need a hit. And that is that extra 1 damage you needed to squeeze through. So that's going to be huge in itself. But on top of that, because you're changing it to any result, you can change this into a wild, a crit, or a shield for the purposes of triggers, or even a skull if you have a character who actually prefers skulls, something like a Scarlet Witch. And this is going to be, in my opinion, the most consistent trigger fishing character in the game. I mean, anyone who even just has a single wild that they need on their triggers, I don't know, like if this is just me or if this happens to everyone, but I play a decent amount of Hulk, being mainly an Avengers player, and the amount of times that I've went for, a big Hulk smash attack, and I don't actually even care about the damage, I just want to throw them and stagger them, and I just can't get that wild, it feels terrible. So with something like this, where between, on an 8 dice attack, you're almost guaranteed to get a hit or a wild, at least one of them. So, because I mean, that's 3 out of 8 sides of the dice. And that's before factoring in crit odds and things like that. So, I mean, you have a really, really high chance of actually getting this trigger off on stuff like that now, which is really, really good. That leadership is absolutely huge for purposes of those characters. And then characters that have harder to hit triggers, like this Steve himself, he's turning their odds from really, really bad to actually quite good. I mean, looking at characters, well, I mean, again, looking at just his own abilities, his bounce being a wild and a hit, usually I'd kind of see that trigger and I'd be like, I don't love that. I don't think I'm going to consistently be able to get that. But now that's just a hit trigger and one power. And, if you get the wild, you don't have to spend the power, great, but you don't actually care that much. Um, so I think that's going to be really good. Brooklyn Brawler having a total of four different symbols to get all of the triggers. Obviously, that's not going to happen too often, even with this leadership, but your odds are significantly improved. I mean, if you're missing any one of those symbols, you can just kind of guarantee that you're not. It's a really powerful leadership, and I'll talk about some of his synergies and things like that in a moment. So then we're going to go into his other two abilities, and then we'll talk briefly about the backside too, because he changes a little bit. So he's got a charge, just your standard charge. It's going to be a 2 cost. He's going to move, and then he's going to attack. That's quite good, especially when you have range 3 attacks. I find charges, for the most part, they like to keep on characters that have primarily range 2s. So having a charge with a range 3, that's a surprising amount of reach. Yeah, he's gonna be able to hit from pretty far away for only 2 power. Yeah, that's not bad at all. Obviously, this Steve Rogers cannot benefit from the leadership of the other Steve Rogers, so he's not getting away with this turn 1 or anything like that. But it will definitely be relevant going into turn 2 because you'll always have enough power for it starting on turn 2. Going into his last ability here, he's got the perfect block. So this is very similar to his old Vibranium Shield. This costs you 2 power. When he's targeted by an attack, he can use the superpower. He's going to add 2 dice to his defense roll against that attack. So the only difference between this and the other version of Steve's Vibranium Shield is this time it affects Mystic. So if this Steve is sitting on 2 power, he can effectively be a 6/6/5 defensive line, which is absolutely absurd. And it just gets even better on his flip side because we're going to go look at his flip now. And for the most part, nothing changes. I don't think any of his attacks go through any changes here. Most of his abilities stay the same. He does drop down to 5 health, which is a little unfortunate. So he in theory, goes down a little bit faster on this side. But then we get his final superpower on this side, which is I can do this all day. When defending against attacks, he adds blanks in his defense roll to its total successes. So that means this model, as long as he's sitting on at least 2 power, can consistently be throwing 6 or 5 dice counting blanks, which is, as someone who plays the other Steve Rogers a lot, ridiculously annoying to take down for your opponent. He's going to be incredibly bulky. Now, of course, they are dice. Sometimes that's gonna whiff, and you're gonna roll a really good attack roll on your defense roll, and get 5 hits or something like that. So you can't be too comfortable with it. You don't want him necessarily taking all of the hits, but he has the tech to stay alive and stick around a lot longer than he really has any right to. So yeah, it's a very, very solid defensive ability. The counting blanks and then having the ability to add extra dice. When you're throwing that many dice, anything to improve their odds is just insane. So defensively, this Steve is going to be incredibly bulky, and then being able to do it on the Mystic side. Of course, it's unfortunate that he has less health on the side that he is. I can do this all day, but I think that's just kind of to balance him out a little bit. Whereas the other Steve, who is kind of more defensive in playstyle, he gets more health on the I can do this all day side. So that makes sense. So overall here, just going through the character kind of in a vacuum, without his leadership, I don't love most of his triggers. I think they're a little bit too hard to hit. I don't think he'd be hitting the shield bounce very often. He's definitely not hitting frontliner very often. Again, maybe when you're going into those larger characters, you'll still get it on occasion, but push, at least you have okay odds on that when you're throwing 7+ dice on average. Don't be using this into Rocket Raccoon if you can avoid it. um but for the most part, he's not going to be super consistent, unfortunately, outside of his own leadership, just because those triggers are very clearly meant to use the Earth's Mightiest Hero's ability. Otherwise, though, he's still throwing 5 dice, and the chance for bounce is always going to be there, so that can be nice. Although I do think it's probably the worst shield throw on a Captain America that we've seen. I mean, it's more dice than Sam's, but Sam's is kind of to make up for that. It's a builder with a better ricochet trigger and the push chance. And then the other Steve, it's still 5 dice. It's a builder instead of a gainer with a better ricochet chance. And personally, I think at least with the old Steve, and probably with this one too, just judging by the cost of most of his abilities, he doesn't usually need much more than a couple power in a turn. So personally, I think the shield bounce could be better, especially if it's not in his own leadership, but it's still a solid attack. It's a range 3 5 dice builder. You can't complain too much about that. And then the ricochet chance is nice. Going into the spender, I think it's going to be really really good into those larger targets. I mean, just look at a model like Beta Ray Bill and how much he's seeing play in the meta right now. And part of that is because of how well he preys on those battleships, quote unquote, that are in the meta right now, the Hulks, the Malachists, and things like that. And Steve's kind of doing a little bit of that as well. He doesn't quite do it as well as something like Beta Ray does because obviously he's not able to throw them, or even less so he can't throw them medium, which is crazy. But he's still going to be something that's at least going to threaten them. They're going to be a little bit hesitant to put those guys too close to Steve because getting that, potentially 9 dice attack going into some of those larger models is going to be really, really scary for an opponent. The push not affecting them, though, definitely makes them a lot less scared of it. I think that push could have been a size 4 and it probably would have been fine. But the frontliner trigger is also going to be something that your opponent's just going to have to keep in mind when they're playing against this model. Whether it's under his leadership or not, the chance of that going off is going to be scary for your opponent. I mean, it's going to be a lot more consistent when you are playing him as the leader, but even when you're not, your opponent's going to have to keep it in mind because if you get that trigger while going into something that's running multiple of the larger lads in the game, you're going to be making your opponent have a bad time throwing multiple 8 or 9 dice attacks in a single turn. That's pretty scary. So overall, I think yeah, the Brooklyn Brawler attack is really really good. It's quite a solid spender, and I think it works pretty well for Captain America. He's using their size against him and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty cool. He's got a charge, so he's not going to have a problem kind of getting into the action and staying into the action. If he gets controlled, he gets thrown away or something like that. It doesn't take very much for him to get back into the fight, so that's going to be good. Perfect block is fantastic. I love Vibranium Shield on original Steve, so having better Vibranium Shield is going to be great. Going into kind of some of his downsides here, unfortunately, he does suffer from the same problem that original Steve has, where if you throw something at him, even on his flip side, his blanks are only for defense rolls, not for dodge rolls. So this Steve is just going to get crumpled under a building. Throw a size 4 or 5, or you can't throw a size 5, but throw a size 4 on the Steve, and you're hitting him really hard. He can't use perfect block. He can't use I can do this all day. He's gonna fall apart to that sort of thing very quickly. I mean, 4 defense dice, so he's still blocking a couple damage on average, but if you can throw a size 4 and then just get a little bit of chip in from something else, whether that's another throw or something, you're gonna not have too many difficulties taking this guy down. Magneto is his worst nightmare, but yeah, like those sorts of things have kind of those plague all of the Captain Americas in this game, I think, except maybe the Shield one. Um, and it's just kind of an unfortunate fact of the Steve Rogers. But otherwise, keep him away from large terrain throws. Have brace for impact handy and stuff like that, and he's going to be an incredibly bulky, hard to remove piece that can threaten large models extremely well. Now, if you're playing into something that's mostly smaller models, you're playing into something like a Web Warriors or something like that. I don't think he's quite as good. I mean, he's still going to be bulky. They're going to have a hard time putting through any damage on him, which is solid. But Brooklyn Brawler really isn't that impressive into mostly size 2s. And this shield doesn't ignore line of sight or cover, so you're not going to be able to get around all of their fancy positioning stuff. So playing into the kind of those wider, more small model focused affiliations, I don't think he's going to be as great, but playing into the kind of battleship meta where you're seeing a lot of Malekiths, a lot of Hulks, and those types of models, he's going to be pretty useful there. I don't know entirely how much we're going to see him outside of Avengers yet, especially because, like I pointed out, a lot of his attacks kind of rely on his own leadership, but I think he's going to be a solid answer for Avengers at least into that kind of meta. Where Avengers is also kind of playing that meta. We also have our own Hulk, so it's kind of nice because we get to bring fully affiliated both the battleship of choice for the Avengers as well as an answer to it. And that's just kind of a good 10 threat core for Avengers there. So that's going to be really interesting. Going into kind of synergies and stuff for this Mr. Rogers here. There's a couple models that kind of stand out to me as models that he's going to synergize particularly well with, mainly because of the leadership here. I don't think any of his other abilities are crazy synergistic with anything. I mean, they're relatively selfish abilities, things like perfect block and charge. He's going to be able to get into the fight and he's going to be relatively self-sufficient, which is great, but for the most part, he's not really doing anything to help out his allies. So he's not much of a support piece in any way. So he can kind of slot in anywhere. Like he kind of to me feels like the Beta Ray Bill if you don't own Beta Ray Bill sort of thing. And of course, not having the throw is a huge downside to that. So he doesn't even really fill that role that well. However, in affiliation and specifically as the leader, I think he's going to be quite good. As the leader, he's going to be able to provide trigger consistency to any model you bring with you, whether they're affiliated or not. So, I mean, going into the immediate obvious one, I mentioned it right at the start, bringing Hulk with this guy is going to be fantastic. Just being able to say I'm always getting that wild, and sometimes again, you just want that one extra damage. Making that 7 dice builder on Hulk, 7 dice plus like one almost guaranteed hit every time, that's going to be really, really good. That's going to help you push through a lot of extra damage on Hulk. And keep in mind with that leadership that if you're already dealing damage on a builder attack, then spending the power to deal extra damage, you're going to be refunding that power to yourself. So there's almost no reason not to do it unless you're saving it for your second attack because it is once per turn. So you want to make sure you get your triggers and things like that off. But for the most part, if you're doing builder attacks, there is almost no reason not to use that leadership when you can. It's going to be really, really good for pushing through tiny bits of extra damage and just kind of consistency across the board. But yeah, so getting the throw and stagger on Hulk's spender or even just the push on his builder sometimes can be worth going for on this. That's going to be really nice. Other characters that are going to benefit a lot from this, kind of in the Avengers scope. One of the first ones I think about is something like Scarlet Witch or Spider Woman, where you're counting the number of skulls or wilds that you're getting, and you're doing better things based on how many of them you got. So that's going to be a really nice little synergy that he's got there with them, where maybe Spider Woman already rolled a wild and she's happy about that. Now you're going to roll two or three wilds, and or two of them, I guess, because you're definitely not rolling getting a third from that ability, but um you're going to be getting +1, which is an extra condition you're handing out on top of an extra damage, and that's really, really nice. So solid little synergies like that. Another model that I saw some people talking about was Luke Cage. I mean, you don't have to tell me twice to run Luke Cage in Avengers. He's one of my favorite models there. Luke Cage, for anyone who doesn't know, on his builder, he has a trigger that doesn't come up super often. I think it's something like a 20% chance, but it's a double wild trigger that gives stagger. So this is just his regular builder. He can make this attack twice in a turn, and double wild is a terrible trigger. It's never going off, and when it does, it almost feels bad between you and your opponent because it's like neither of you expected this. You were just trying to build power, maybe do some damage. Um, but now with this leadership, I think I heard people tossing around something like 50%, which is actually really, really good. 50% for getting a stagger on a builder attack from a 3 threat model that's kind of already doing his job just by standing in the middle of the board. That's really, really powerful. So 50% stagger on cage, I think is going to be one of the better synergies with this cap, and I'm definitely excited to try that out myself. On top of that, I mean, any Avenger that has any sort of wild trigger is worth considering under the Steve. I mean, if it's even mildly useful, it's going to be more consistent under him. It's going to be great. Models like Voodoo, with two a wild trigger on his spender and his builder, both of which are stacking wild triggers, so it's for each one you get. I mean, having power sap with this ability, you're going to pay one power, turn one of your dice into a wild, and then not only are you getting an extra damage, not only are you removing one of their power, but you're also gaining one back, and it's a builder. So you're basically spending one power to get two. I mean, it's pure value in that case. And then going into Fooder's Spender, where he's counting the wilds to just deal extra damage and burn their power off. Again, now that one conversion, one power you spent, is not doing one extra damage, but two extra damage, and it's burning their power. There's a lot of value on models like that for this leadership. You can take that into splashes as well. Things like Rogue or other SAP power models are going to really benefit from this. I think SAP power in general is going to be one of the really, really good ones with this ability. And then just anyone else, I'm sure I missed some who have stacking wild triggers. If you want to get into some more kind of out there splashes, you can look at stuff like Red Skull 2. He's got some pretty nasty triggers on his builder attack, or gainer attack rather. It's six dice with two different triggers. I think they're both like one of them's a wild shield and one of them's a wild crit or something like that. I'm not 100% familiar with what they are, but using this leadership, you can relatively consistently probably even get both, which is quite good. Because I mean, for him, I think the two triggers are one of them is a push, and then the other one is like he gets to make a short advance or something after that. So those are really, really good. Another one, because I've been playing around with splashing this character in a few places, is something like Corvus Glaive. Corvus Glaive, who is going to be able to get his flurry trigger on his spender attack a little bit more consistently. I can English today, because that's something like a wild shield, so you've got the improved odds on something like that. Another fun thing with him is you can kind of you can skew your dice a little bit with him because he's counting one of his skulls as a crit, so you can turn the one that he's counting as a crit into like a wild or something like that. And then if you have a second skull in the roll, that now turns into a crit. So an almost perfect roll you can pretty easily turn into a perfect roll. And Corvus is quite capable of that because he's capable of counting blanks and stuff like that. So you can do some fun stuff with that. I'm sure there's other synergies that I haven't thought of yet with this too. I mean, one that I've kind of been toying around with in my head is something like Supergiant. I don't think it would be necessarily good, but I think it would be fun. Because Supergiant on her spender, she has this crazy trigger. I don't remember what the things are, but it's like four or five symbols, something crazy like that. On I want to say an eight dice attack that instantly I don't know if it dazes if they're on their healthy, or if it's always a KO, but it instantly knocks a character. And it's super inconsistent. It's not considered good at all. But if you can make it more consistent, it seems like it would at least be fun, maybe not necessarily good. But yeah, in general, there's just tons of crazy things you can do with this leadership. I am super excited to start playing around with it. But I think that's going to do it for this kind of character overview. I don't really know what I'm calling this series yet, so bear with me on that one. I'm sure there will be a title on this video of some form, but haven't quite figured out what I'm doing for that yet. So I think we're going to wrap up this one here, though. We're almost at 30 minutes, which is, I don't want these videos to be significantly longer than 30 minutes, and I'm terrible for rambling, so my outro is probably going to take me over that. But yeah, I'm very excited for this character. I think he's going to be really good in a lot of places. Haven't had much chance to actually play him yet. I played him in one battle report that would have went up probably last weekend by the time this video comes out, um, where he didn't really get a great showing. I unfortunately made a lot of misplays during that game, but I was really excited to put him on the table, and I do think his leadership's going to open up a lot of doors. So Yeah, let me know what you guys think. Do you guys like this new Captain America? Where do you want to play him? Do you think he's going to be really, really good in, affiliation XYZ? I heard my friend Reed was talking about possibly putting him in something like new Modoc, because the wild letting you turn your results into hits is also going to help him with his triggers there. So he's kind of getting the benefits of his leadership there as well. So that's going to be cool. If there's anywhere you guys think he's going to shine, or any models you think are going to shine underneath his leadership, do let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Did I miss something that's like a super stupidly good combination? I'd love to hear it. That would be really, really cool. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this though. That's all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it's kind of either helped you learn about the new character, or if he's already released by the time you're watching this, helped you get some ideas for what kind of things you might want to run with him. Um, Personally, like I said, I'm gonna be really excited to slot him into my Avengers. I'm probably gonna be running a triple leader list now with both of the Steves and Sam in there. Super excited to be trying them all out and see how they work together. I'm kind of curious about running Sam under this guy as well. And, I think the shield throw getting increased chance to push is going to be really, really nice as well. And of course the ricochet. But yeah, like I said, my rambling is going to take this over 30 minutes, and it looks like I've done that. Um, so we are going to wrap up here. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys are new to the channel, please do subscribe. I plan to continue doing more of these, as well as regular battle reports are coming out pretty consistently at this point. We seem to have gotten on a good track. We'll see if that continues as school starts up soon. But yeah, it would be great to see that. We've been doing really, really well lately. The last few weeks have been crazy good for the channel, so I appreciate all you guys so much. And yeah, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you all for watching. Peace.